Right, let's crack on with the main news today, because the government's counter-extremism unit is currently monitoring tweets by Elon Musk.
Well, the move follows the tech billionaire's recent criticisms of the government and its senior ministers.
Most notably Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips, who's accused him of endangering her through his social media posts.
That's after she faced personal criticisms from him over the grooming rape gangs scandal.
Meanwhile, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has jumped on a plane. This time she's gone to China.
She's set to restart trade and investment talks, but that's despite government borrowing costs surging to their highest level in 27 years.
Let's talk to former advisor to Boris Johnson, Oscar Reddrop. Morning to you, Oscar.
Morning.
Morning.
The government may be very unhappy with what Elon Musk is saying. They've got a right to be so. But by doing all this, are they just poking the bear?
Completely. It makes strategically no sense to me to, as he would see it, to undertake surveillance and censorship kind of policy to the highest profile and, as we sit here now, most influential advocate for freedom of speech and anti-censorship. You will never win that fight. The best way to respond to someone like Elon Musk, and I imagine Elon would say in his defence, he would say, "Look, I'm troubleshooting. I'm identifying the elephant in the room problems that that the UK government are unwilling to or unable to deal with, and the best way for the government to respond to that is to crack on and solve those problems." And that is where I think the public would want the government to prioritise as well. Having said that, what he said about Jess Phillips was wrong. And I think there would be a lot of people who are not politically aligned with Jess Phillips who would say the same. But we can't... But I also think the public don't want the government to hide behind that and not to confront the problems that Elon has identified. And actually, in fairness, it's not just Elon identifying these problems anymore. And people want delivery, and they want the Home Office to crack on just a whole ream of issues that are affecting communities now. If you get into a scrap with Elon Musk on this stuff, you will lose.
Where is the line, though, Oscar, when it comes to free speech and then saying something that puts another person at harm? Because Jess Phillips is saying that this misinformation, as she describes it, that Elon Musk has been spreading about her, has endangered her life. And there's reports in the papers this morning that she's now got security officials with her at all times. And that is serious when you think about David Amos and you think about Joe Cox. I mean, there is a dangerous precedent here, isn't there?
That is why, in all fairness, this balancing act between confronting the problems that we do not want to sometimes, for sensitivity issues or, wokeness or political correctness we don't want to confront that cause real damage to society. And at the same time, in those attempts, you like as you rightly say, Ellie, you don't want to endanger the front men and women of democracy in this country, MPs. And, we have seen, it is close to the surface sometimes, and we have seen MPs die. So I'm not trying to belittle or undermine that. It is a real kind of balancing act. But the people who believe that what Elon said about Jess Phillips is wrong will always believe that and understand that. Don't waste your time getting into a scrap with him on it. It makes no sense because, to be fair, he's not a shrinking violet, Elon Musk.
Oh, no.
He's not going to sit back and go, oh gosh, the government are surveillancing my tweets. I must take a step back here. That's really put the jitters in me.
No, he'll double down.
It's not going to happen. He'll double down. So even from a protection standpoint, in terms of, we want to look after someone like Jess, and we don't want him going after, our MPs and causing trouble. Like, even from that perspective, just leave him alone. Don't fan the fires.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense. It really makes no sense to me.
Does the Chancellor going to China make any sense when the economy seems to be falling around her ears over here?
Well, if she was sat here now, she would say that, our plan for growth and my plan for the economy is absolutely interlinked with going to the world's second biggest economy in China and striking up deals and, all that kind of good stuff. However, and this is just the way it is now, she is under intense scrutiny and pressure Look, I might have worked for the Conservative Party, I might have worked for Boris Johnson, I might be a Conservative, blah, blah, blah. But I want this country to do well. I'm sure your viewers, no matter what political allegiances they have, they want more money in their pocket, they want an economy that's working. The markets have declared, we have no confidence in your plan. And I have to admit, and I would love, when a Labour minister or, the next time they're on your show, if they could point to a policy or, that was within that budget or outside of it that specifically targets and engenders growth. I mean,
Right.
Great, but it's been non-existent. It has been non-existent, and if anything, that real aggressive taxation, effectively, on businesses it's incompatible with growth. And I think she only has really two options now in terms of the headroom that she's now left herself, which is more taxes or austerity. And because of all the the promises that were kept before the that were stated before the election, I mean, in the eyes of the public, tax rises, she won't survive that. And I think amongst a lot of Labour MPs, and you have to remember just very quickly on this, there are so many Labour MPs who have no hopes or prospects of ever getting, rising up the ladder. So in the coming months and years, those that don't, austerity would just be completely unpalatable to them. They will start causing trouble for this Labour government through the backbenches. She's in a horrible position, but it partly is her own doing.
OK. Oscar?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, a spokesperson from the Home Office has said they've stepped up extra monitoring to assess content and the reach of what is being shared on the social media site X, especially in relation to accounts with large followings, including Elon Musk's. The counter-terrorism unit has been involved in content analysis and wider risk assessment.
Well, it all ties into our poll of the day. Today, we're asking, has the Home Office shown it's got the wrong priorities by monitoring Elon Musk's tweets? We'll bring the live results throughout the day. Final result in Martin's show later. And if you want to take part, please do. Go to gbnews.com/poll.
Now, the Labour Mayor for Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, has distanced himself from Sir Keir Starmer and the government's stance on a national inquiry into the grooming rape gangs scandal.
Well, talking to local radio last night, he says he thinks there's a case for a limited national inquiry in order to hold people to account.
Well, GB News can also exclusively reveal that over 75% of UK adults want a national inquiry into grooming gangs.
Well, our reporter Charlie Peters has been talking to a whistleblower, Jane Senior.
Andy Burnham and Khalid Mahmood have tonight said that they want a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. Do you think more Labour figures should back them in that demand?
Absolutely, Charlie. I think, I think, first of all, it should have been a vote where MPs were not going to be whipped. They could, decide themselves. And I think there should be a national inquiry. I think it needs to be very different to what people are kind of shouting for. I don't think it needs to take 7 years. I don't think it needs to be an investigation, inquiry that, just gives us statistics after a year. I think it needs to go one step further, and it needs to look at those senior professionals that were complicit, ignored this, covered it up. Because we sit here and you look at not just Rotherham, but you look across the UK, I am not aware of any professional that's ever been held to account for this, either in any town or the 50 towns that you've identified at the GB News.
Well, our political editor, Christopher Hope, sat down with the Conservative MP for Keighley and Ilkley on Chopper's political podcast to discuss the issue.
We think there are at least 50 towns affected by this. Do you think it's more than that?
I would not be surprised. And the reason... and I've also...
How many more than 50? 70? What do you think?
I don't know, but I would not be surprised. And that is why we need that national inquiry. I've said in the House of Commons chamber a few times now that I am absolutely, as others are concerned about, that the scale of the issue in the Bradford district will dwarf that of Rotherham, Rochdale, Oldham, Telford. And that's why we need that inquiry. And I do not understand for the life of me why people in positions of responsibility are denying my request and the request of victims.
Well, let's talk to police and crime commentator Oliver Lawrence. Good to see you this morning, Oliver. What do you make of this poll that GB News is sharing? 75% of UK adults want a national inquiry into grooming gangs.
Yeah, good morning, Ellie. Good morning, Stephen. Yeah, any scandal which has been going on for a quarter of a century, where we've identified thousands of victims across this country who've been victims to these rape gangs, where there's been no action, where these matters have been suppressed, where we found time and time again that government agencies, be it councils, police services or social services, have let down and failed to act to protect victims right across this country. I think a new national inquiry is important. I think the terms of reference are incredibly important in the fact that we want to find who are those that are accountable for the failures of supporting the most vulnerable in our society. So it's critically important. I'm not surprised at all to see large numbers of the public voting in favour of such an inquiry.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because often these things... I mean, there was talk about this inquiry, if it was to take place, going on for 7 years. I mean, we need something which is going to be comparatively short and very effective, don't we?
Yeah, no, definitely, Stephen, without doubt. You've got to understand that victims have been going through this pain and this harm for many, many years. They want quick answers and they want accountability. So it's critically important. Any inquiry that we do set down and the witnesses we do call will be important that it is done in a timely fashion. The issue being is the fact, because this will be such large scale, because we believe this has been going on in more than 50 towns and cities across the United Kingdom, that is going to take some time. There are going to be a lot of people that will want to be heard, and there'll be a lot of people equally who'll be seeking instruction from lawyers as how best to respond to some of their failures to these victims right across the country. So it's a delicate balance that the government has got to reach, but they've first of all got to reach the conclusion that they need a national inquiry. At the point, obviously, they're resisting that, and it doesn't look like coming anytime soon.
Do you believe that grooming gangs are still operating in towns and cities in this country?
Oh, without a doubt, Ali. You know, we look at Operation Stovewood, which was the largest investigation carried out by the National Crime Agency, which started in 2014. It identified over 1,000 victims. It arrested over 200 people. Only 20 convictions totaling 250 years across all of that. And we know today that they've referred that matter now back to South Yorkshire Police and other forces up and down the country to continue taking complaints from victims. So undoubtedly, these issues are still going on. But there is some fantastic work going on by frontline operational police officers to investigate these matters and to put these people before the courts. But what we've equally got to deal with is the failure in conviction rates in our justice system. They are far too low. People aren't being held accountable. And where there is the option to do so, we should be looking at removing those people that have a dual nationality and have come to this country from other places in the world.
Mm-hmm. OK. Oliver, good to see you. I was going to ask you, why is it all failing? But because that's the point of the inquiry, isn't it, to try and find that out if and when it happens. Let's hope it does. Thanks very much indeed.
Well, there is this changing stance from Labour, isn't there, suggesting that maybe there will be a national inquiry, but only if victims' groups call for it specifically. That's what Jess Phillips has said this week. But that is a changing stance, isn't it?
Well, it is, but let's call for it then. Let those people call for it, because obviously this can't go on. Anyway, the Home Office has issued a statement saying no child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation. It's paramount we do more to protect vulnerable children, which is why we are working at pace across government to drive forward real action to implement the recommendations of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse.